Welcome to Lift Your Legacy. My name is Jacob Rupp, father, husband, and rabbi. And each week we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unlock your inner potential and create change that will impact the future. Thank you for listening, and let's get to it. This is the Lift Your Legacy podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Rupp. Today I'm very excited to have friend and mentor, Ms. Jackie Engel, who is the former Today Show psychologist from Australia and a world-famous speaker, educator, motivator, leadership developer. A lot more adjectives or ad words apparently that are more appropriate, but hopefully we'll suffice with that. Jackie, what's going on? How are you today?
Good. I'll pay you later for that intro.
Okay, good. If I had known you were paying me, I would have said more. Anyway, so Jackie, tell us a little bit about your awesome story and how you got to where you are today, please.
Yeah, totally unplanned, as the best things often are.
Yep.
Grew up in Sydney, Australia, totally not connected to anything Jewish. And, my brother started becoming more observant at some point after a birthright type experience. He stayed on learning for 2 weeks and he started becoming observant. And I freaked out. I thought he joined some sort of cult or some sort of, I didn't know what it was. Like, it was something very extreme. I had no connection whatsoever to anything Jewish. I was in Sydney, Australia, which is the least Jewish city, I think, in Australia. And at some point I realized, I had a moment of honesty with myself also, that I'm born Jewish and I don't have a clue what it means to be Jewish. And at the same time, I was on the Today Show saying things like the way to happiness is to embrace all of yourself.
Wait, 1 second. Hang on. So when did you get on the Today Show? How did that, let's start with that.
So I was a psychologist in Sydney, Australia. That was I was very passionate about psychology. I wanted to be a psychologist and was very into personal growth, helping people. I knew from quite young that I wanted to go into that area. I was just fascinated by it.
Okay.
I was fascinated by it. And I looking back, I really feel it was the way I was searching for truth. I was exploring, like, what makes people tick? What's the deeper meaning in life? What are we doing here? What drives people? What's the goal? How do you be happy? Like, I was just curious about those big philosophical questions, and psychology seemed to have the most available wisdom that I could access to be able to grow myself and help other people. And then when I actually found Torah later in life, much later at the age of 30, that desperate kind of thirst for understanding the psychology totally dropped away because I was quenched by Torah. But now I still have the ability and skills and interest to help people, so I could still use the psychology, which is great. But my focus shifted because I actually had what I think my soul was looking for, which I didn't even know what it was.
Okay, so we're gonna see. This is why we do unscripted, because that was huge. We're gonna get back to the television show in a moment. When you are now a practicing psychologist and you find, so to speak, Torah, first of all, explain what that means. What in Torah did you find that spoke to you so profoundly? And how was it, or where did you feel like you weren't as drawn towards the psychology and were kind of more into Torah? Can you just work on that intellectual development, if you would?
Yeah. I found that obviously the things that related to me the most, like Musar, personal growth, and Musar, the system of spiritual psychological development in the Jewish, one of the Jewish systems, really spoke to me very deeply. Rav Volba, Ale Shor. I had the privilege of learning through Rav Kellerman in Jerusalem every day for about 4 years, literally. Musar and Chinuch, I had him for 2 to 3 hours a day often.
Character development and child raising. Those
character development, child raising, all the things that related to what psychologists cover. I was just then fascinated by the depth and wisdom of the Jewish system in a way that I had never, ever seen or heard before. So through my own career lens as a psychologist, I saw the depth and wisdom of Torah that was unparalleled. And the thing that freaked me out the most was that every single thing that I believed in and resonated with as true at that time in my life, I found the source in Torah. So that just freaked me out, because everything I knew to be true, here's where it comes from in Torah. Here's what Torah says here. And Torah became like the mother ship that everything pulled out of. And that just was so empowering, because I then had immediate connection in a very deep way to Torah and Judaism, and saw it as incredible professional development, which is what allowed me the courage to stay and learn for about 5 years full time.
So you found that your whole experience while learning for 5 years was even greater than the experience you had had in university and in your training as a psychologist.
No comparison, because it spoke to my soul. So it meant more to me personally, which I didn't realize. Psychology for sure meant meant a lot to me at the time. But looking back, and the comparison of the two things is this goes into your core. There's an ability to access your core essence of who you are. And I think until a Jew embraces that and allows it to be in the foreground of their life rather than pushed to the back, and it's like something I have to deal with on high holidays, and it's something I have to deal with my mom and my grandmother. But like for me, that was like I was nearly non-existent as a Jew in my life. Even culturally, I had no cultural connection. So it takes energy, and then you're kind of betraying and denying a part of yourself when you do that. And that, when you give that permission, I think that's, by the way, I think that's one of the most moving things that people go to Israel, no matter where they're at in the Jewish journey, is that their soul gets permission to be in the foreground. Their identity gets permission to be in the foreground. And you're walking around Israel going like, oh my gosh, I'm a majority. I'm a majority. Like, it's so weird. Like, you feel so validated that you're like part of this people and you're not a minority. And everyone laughs when I say that, because everyone's had that feeling of like, we're all family and we're walking around. It's like, cool. So that also is permission for your soul to be in the foreground and to listen to your higher voice more.
And that's only accessible. And I'm asking from the lens of the fact that there is, on a lot of different experiences that Jewish people have, there's a tremendous amount of great information out there that really works. So on that side, what is the unique value that Torah offers? If it's going to, so you find something that profoundly resonates with you even more than you had ever seen in your career. So is that on an informational side, but then you're bringing, there's like this qualitative difference of the spiritual side of kind of embracing your own identity, that which you never could get, so to speak, reading a Tony Robbins book or something of that equivalent. So like, what was that really like for you, and how would you advise someone who has that draw towards deeper, I don't know if you want to call it social science truth, right? Which is of course only funny for those of you that whatever, what exactly drew you to that, and what kind of advice could you give a person that's looking for more of that doesn't know where to go?
So I was a bit of a unusual character, I think, in that my approach, even as a psychologist, was that, and I don't know where I got this from. I don't know if it's like a Jewish thing or just something I got from my family. But my approach, even as a psychologist, was that you can only be there for a client to the level that you've worked on yourself. It doesn't have to be the same issue. But if you haven't gone to the depths in yourself of growth and self-awareness and not be scared to look inside, you can't really guide someone else how to look inside. Like, you really got to walk the walk. It was a very big philosophy of me to walk the walk in whatever you're doing. You don't have to be the same, but you have to have it's the same courage you're asking of your clients, to look inside, to feel the pain, to have it move through them, to be self-aware, to heal. You have to do that for yourself. You can't be scared of that. So I was very into throwing yourself into something. Even part of my psychology training was you had to be in group therapy to learn group therapy. So like, wow. I had great training as well. And that's an experience. Like, you have to know what your clients go through, and you have to know what feels like is transformative in the process. So you have to really know yourself well. And I think that's so too, I did that with Torah. And so I could feel from both. I don't think I got nothing out of psychology. I think it was very, very valuable. It just wasn't speaking to my core in the same depth, in the same way. So I think there's a lot of psychology that is truth. There's a lot of psychology that is aligned with Torah. It just doesn't have the whole picture. It's on the psychological realm, whereas Torah is the psychology, the emotions, the physical. It's everything all at once. It's a spiritual frame that includes psychology. Psychology is just one frame and one realm. And one of the hardest things for me was that I was coming into Torah worlds with psychology glasses on and trying to shove everything in Torah into psychology. And at some point after a year or two, I was about to combust because it just didn't fit. And I didn't know like what to do. So I decided I have to put my psychology on the shelf, keep it by, I'm not throwing it out, but keep it there and just like learn Torah with an open mind, as if I've never heard any of these ideas and concepts before, and not try and make them fit into a previous frame of reference. And that was really, really valuable. I wish I'd known that earlier. So that's what I would also recommend someone coming in from social sciences or psychology or social work, any of those helping professions. Obviously, you've got to relate to Torah because of something you've learned, but at the same time, not try and fit it into a preconceived idea, because it's so much bigger, it's broader. And that was powerful.
So that's amazing, because you're saying essentially that it took you as a trained professional over a year to 2 years to essentially come in as a blank slate, and then that's really when you took off.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I mean, I was a blank slate as far as Judaism because I had no background literally. And I went to some semblance of Sunday school, which was in my memory sticks in as like a torture experience on Sunday.
Yeah.
But other than that, I had no experience. I didn't even go to shul on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. Like I didn't even know, I didn't even keep Yom Kippur. I didn't know anything about anything. It was like as far away as you can get. Probably because my father was a Holocaust survivor. So there was a self-protective mechanism there. But there was a blessing in being able to come back and not have any preconceived idea of Judaism to overcome. And when I was learning it at an older age, that was also a blessing and a curse. I knew nothing on the one hand. On the other hand, there was a purity and a depth at being the age I was older, I was 30, I wasn't starting out young, and being able to absorb it in a deeper way with not having to overcome any preconceived ideas or emotional reactions that I'd had to other things I'd learned, or in the Torah way. What I had to overcome was my preconceived ideas psychologically as a psychologist, and realize that Torah is much broader and it encompasses psychology, and you can't squish Torah into that psychological frame.
That's fascinating. So I guess the natural question to ask is, if you're trying to set up the ideal situation for, the rampant amount of, and again, it's not, if a person's choosing to assimilate, I don't want to say on the record, but of course it makes me sad a little bit, but I think that what the biggest tragedy is that there is such a lack of knowledge, as you described, that you had growing up. And I certainly am aware of that myself in my own upbringing. If the idea is that coming to it from I don't want to call it pure, but from where you're not trying to figure out how does this fit in context, where do you focus your energies in terms of working with people, and in terms of how you would, look at and advising people in terms of raising their own kids and working on a collegiate level? Like, where do you start the process if a person is, not going to, quote, grow up in a completely Torah observant environment growing up? I said that twice.
Where do they start? What process?
The learning process. How do you try to find that purity? Is there a magical age whereby a person is the most fitting for like learning and growing, or is it just wherever they can get in?
I don't think so. Torah is eternal and speaks to every level, every stage of life. And I think you can't come out. I wasn't pure, meaning I definitely related to, the reason it resonated so deeply was because it made sense psychologically, because I had the psychological background. So I think you definitely bring who you are to the table, and you should find the things in Torah that inspire you the most and the things you're most interested in. I came through the psychological lens because that was my lens. Other people I know come through the scientific lens. Other people I know come through like the artistic or creative lens. Other people I know come through more the spiritual, mystical lens. So like, it depends what resonates with you. Not follow the things that inspire you. Like follow those things that speak to you. Just don't get stuck in your preconceived idea of how you think the world works. So it's about oscillating back and forth between your own frame and then saying, oh, I can't shove Torah into that frame, but that's interesting because I relate to that. And being okay with process. I think that this generation is not okay with process, and we don't allow things to unfold. And the way I often describe it to my students, because they struggle with this a lot, just like I did, is you learn something here in Torah and you're like, oh, that's amazing. That's so inspiring. I totally get that. And then you learn something like over here and you go, I sort of get that. Like that's interesting. That's okay. Like, I don't really know where to put that. I'm just going to leave that alone. Then you learn something here and you're like, no way am I ever doing that. No way am I interested in that. No, like, forget it. That's just obscene, like offensive, whatever. And again, without making big conclusions about Judaism, I think we try and pressure ourselves to make conclusions. And over time, you start learning more and more pieces of the map, and it goes broader and broader and broader. And you're like, oh my gosh, that thing relates to that thing that I thought was like obscene. And that thing, oh my gosh, that relates to, and over like 1, 2, 3 years, I would say, you start to develop a much bigger map if you can just hang on in the process and allow yourself to learn nuggets and pieces and bits of Torah that are interesting and in their own right, stand alone in a way. But over time, they create a map and they create a much bigger frame of reality of like how to view the world, from the spiritual all the way down to the physical. And you can't rush that. I mean, it's just like, Torah is infinite and deep. And so it takes about, I think, 1 to 2 to 3 years to really try and find where the pieces fit and how they all relate, and like separating that out from I have to do it all now. I think a lot of people learn things, and there's part of them that's inspired. The soul is inspired about the wisdom, and they see the depth of wisdom, and then the body freaks out about having to do that and goes, oh my gosh, no way, no way. I like my life. I don't want to change anything. Thank you so much. And being able to work with that tension between body and soul is crucial. I don't think there's enough spoken about it. I started developing classes because, again, the process of change as a psychologist is something I can bring to the table, that going at the level of your body, not your soul, is the most important thing. So being able to integrate the change, the soul wants to change now. They found that New Year's resolutions, January 1, everything spikes. Diets go up. You'll know this, Jacob. Diets go up, gym memberships go up, everything spikes. And they found statistically February 1, everything is back to normal. Why? Right. Because the soul's like, I want to change. Yeah, I'm never eating chocolate ever again. And then the body's like, okay, I'll try. And February 1, it's like, I'm not playing, no way. And you have to learn how to work again internally. It comes back to self-awareness. It comes back to knowing yourself. What is my body saying? What is my soul saying? Do I even realize that I have different voices in my head? And which voice am I listening to? And how do I work with them together so there's a connection, and so that I can move forward and achieve the goals I want to do, whilst including what my body needs and the pace that my body needs to go. Because we know that there's a body and a soul that have different types of consciousness. They're different profiles, you could say.
So zoom in on that a little bit, because I think that is a tremendous challenge that a lot of people have, which is, trying to learn how to balance, and if you just kind of go up the scale in terms of people that are in a different stage of their life, where they might be dealing with families and jobs and relationships and all of these different areas, which are in health, obviously, or not necessarily obviously, but should be obvious, all of these different areas. And then you tack on this additional level of spiritual growth, which, as you mentioned, comes with a tremendous sense, like every great thing, like, oh my gosh, there's so much I can do, and there's such a tremendous level of refinement. And how does a person balance all of those different drives, and at the same time have this much greater, I don't want to call it pressure, opportunity to develop themselves spiritually? How does that work?
Because the frame of how you view the world is not what I'm doing with my hobbies, and then there's this Jewish spiritual frame or spiritual idea or spiritual knowledge. As the more you learn with that map I was describing, the more you see the whole thing in one map. So it becomes integrated, that all of my hobbies and interests fit into a broader vision and purpose for who I want to be in the world, what I want my life to be about, that there's meaningfulness, that I'm fulfilled, and that I have a life of purpose, including going to the gym, including, the physical level. It's not excluded in Torah. It's really integrative and holistic. Even though holistic might have a hippie kind of vibe that not everyone relates to, it really is in a very grounded way holistic. It includes all of ourselves in how to be the best we can be and inspire Jewish greatness.
So how does a person begin their own unique journey? Because I think that one of the things certainly that intimidated me and continues to this day to intimidate me, I get free airtime of your psychological expertise, is this idea that I don't fit the mold of what a quote Orthodox Jew is supposed to do. That there is certainly a perception that, well, I'm not going to be like that, and so therefore I don't know what I am. So how do you find your unique voice, so to speak, that is in keeping with your soul mission?
Right. So I would say if I had to pick two issues that were the most challenging and the most important, one would be what we spoke about, going the pace of your body. So the growth is healthy and slow and integrative. The second is what you just mentioned, which is how do I make this mine, and how do I not lose myself in the process, which is a very, very big challenge. And again, I don't think it's so commonly navigated in a public way like this. So it's good to have a chance to talk about it. The trick here is you have to learn Judaism from the Jews, but not judge Judaism by the Jews. Meaning you have to learn Judaism from Jews, but your unique challenge is to find out, with all the wisdom that you're learning, how do I bring that into my life and retain who I am? You're not a mistake. You're not like, oh, whoops, Jackie only found Judaism at 30. That's a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was exactly what I meant to be doing. And in Chovos Levavos, duties of the heart, this says that there's 3 circles, and where they overlap is the area that points to your unique purpose and mission in life. One is what you're good at. So knowing what you're good at, you have to know. So many people are terrified to admit what they're good at. They think it's ego, but it's really not, because without that, you can't even start. The difference between the ego and the humility is that you credit God with your gifts and talents, not yourself, you know. So you have to know what God-given gifts you've been given, what God-given talents you have, and what you want to build on. That's number one. Number two.
Can you go into that for 1 second, and then we'll get to number two? Yeah. How does a person, I don't know if it's a fear in our generation of restricting ourselves to other things, or it's just that we never really focused on that, but how does a person really connect to those things that they are really good at?
They have to experiment. That's the whole job. Have you ever seen kids when they go, the kids are obsessed with trying out everything. Obsessed. They're insanely, everything. They're curious. They're experimenting. As children, you're meant to try out everything. And this whole American dream, or not American, Western dream of you can do anything you put your mind to is complete fallacy, because you're not meant to do everything. You're meant to actually, as you experiment in life, get more narrow and narrow and narrow with your focus about what you're really, really good at and what you really, really love. The second circle is, what do you love? What inspires you? What gives you energy and passion? As opposed to, you could be good at something, get drained by it. It's probably not something you're meant to do as a primary thing. Or you could, like I could say I love art, but I'm terrible if you ever saw me draw. So I'm not meant to be an artist, even though I could enjoy it and whatever. So it's usually something that you're good at, something that that you love. And the third is, what opportunities come your way, what doors open and what doors don't when you really put in the right effort. It's not about not trying, it's about being active, but noticing when doors open and when doors do not open despite repeated attempts. And it's interesting because one of the key things to look for, and this is one of the biggest mistakes, getting back to your question, how do I find my voice? If I look at around and I say, I don't look like this, I don't want to be like that. Like, this is not me. By the way, I used to do that all the time. I would like gawk at these Orthodox Jews in Sydney and go like, we're somehow the same. Like, no way. And like be kind of enjoy being repulsed about it, but like was the weirdest thing. And then I would forget about it for 6 months. I had nothing to do with Judaism, but I would stare at them. I wonder if other people did that, if it's just me. But I think that the most important thing is to see, what does the community around me need? Whatever when I say community, I mean your work community, your family and friends, your whatever it is. Like, what do I have? What talents and gifts and passions do I have that I can bring that's missing in the world around me? So people mistakenly say, they go and look for people to reflect themselves, and they look around and say, wow, these people, they're not my people. They don't look like me. They don't sound like me. They don't feel like me. I don't fit here because I don't see myself reflected back. That's a mistake, because you're not meant to be a clone in a community where you feel like we're all the same type. You're specifically meant to be your unique self and bring to the community or your area what you can bring that is uniquely you. So that's the irony. You're not meant to look for what's reflected back if it's the same as you. You're meant to say, what can I bring to this community that they don't have? And when you find a match between what you can bring and they don't have and what you're passionate and good at, it's the most fulfilling feeling in the world. There is nothing more fulfilling than that match. When you have talents and passion and skill, and you find the world in some way, even in your mini world around you or your work world or your family, they need something from you and you have that thing to give, you feel $1 million, more than $1 million. It's priceless. So.
And that's so hard, because so few people ever really reach that level. I mean, I've had this experience where I ask people, like, what do you want to do? And 9 times out of 10, literally, I get blank stares. Like, no one ever asked me, what do I want to do? So why is that so hard nowadays? I mean, I can surmise that, just we try to rush to a place of stability or comfort, and we never want to take it, because what you're suggesting sounds next to impossible. It means I'm going to be completely out of my comfort zone for a large percentage of my life, kind of bouncing around, trying to figure out. So how does a person find that, and why is that so hard, especially now?
Because for 2 reasons. I think people don't have a drive to look inwards enough. They're looking outward. The whole world is defined externally. So everyone's looking outwards for the clarity and happiness, which you'll never find it there. And number 2 is, if they do look inwards, they're too scared to be ruthlessly honest with themselves. They think they're scared to be honest. So if they do look inwards, they're terrified, rather than realizing that is the answer. Meaning, don't judge yourself. Have a drive inward and be ruthlessly honest, because then you know exactly where you are and you have clarity. There is nothing better than clarity. There is nothing, you can't even start anything without clarity, but most people don't have the clarity. They look at you with blank stares, like, I don't know, I haven't really thought about it. Or I've thought about it, but I have no idea how to get there. So one is, stop looking externally and trying to, like, people, I don't know about you, but in Australia, after high school, people do a BA, a Bachelor of anything. because they don't know what they want to do. So they just do a BA because that's what you do when you don't know what to do, Bachelor of anything. And then they go traveling on the world trip, especially from Australia, because we're so far away that we go to these big trips. And they go traveling around the world for a year, 6 months, 3 months, whatever it is, in the hope that clarity is going to hit them from the sky. And they're going to get clarity about what they want to do with their life. Now, I'm not saying traveling doesn't give you a different sense of yourself and a different sense of reflection and whatever ability to experience the world, so you mature in a different way. But overall, that's not where the clarity comes from. And that could all be bypassed by looking within, knowing the answer is inside, not outside, and having either getting yourself a coach, a therapist, a rabbi, a rebbitzin, someone who can coach you in that process of like looking within and being totally open to be super honest with yourself about everything, your motivations, asking yourself. And sometimes I'll walk around and I'll go like, why did I just do that? Like I'll do something and I'll think, what was motivating me? And like, you have to be able and willing to say, oh, I just wanted attention, or, like I just wanted the honor, or I just wanted, I don't know, like whatever. You have to be honest with yourself and to say, oh, okay, that's interesting. Like that's still motivating me that way. Oh, that's interesting. It's not who I want to be. So let me work on it. Like, people are so scared to see what's in there because they think that they're a bad person, as opposed to, oh, let me just see what I need to grow and change. It's never all of who you are. When you find something there, it's just a reactive pattern or something that you haven't worked on yet. Or, some people I think again too full of judgment, self-judgment rather than self-acceptance with the desire to grow. And I think that those two things drive a certain awareness inward to not be scared to look inward. And when you do look inward, be really honest with yourself.
That's amazing. So is that the major teaching that you feel it fits our generation? I know that everyone has sort of their unique thing in terms of the students that you teach and the message that they need to hear and the Torah that, really speaks to you profoundly. But, we see that wherever there is this huge opportunity, these really huge businesses are able to be built. So the whole industry of the university, which is, I don't know what the numbers are of people that are spending money, but it's so huge. You're saying that that's fulfilling an existential crisis that people have when they hit 18. Is that sort of like what you feel like you want to bring to the world? Like this concept of, I forgot what you called ruthless clarity, like ruthless self-honesty. Like how do you develop that?
I don't think it's my thing I'm bringing to the world. I just think it's something that people are scared of. And I think that today's challenge really is to shut your world up enough so that you even have a sense of inner reflection. That's the challenge of today's world, more than when I was a teenager or in my 20s. So like nowadays, you don't even get the chance to look inward because everything is so distracting to pull you out. So like that in itself is a huge accomplishment. Like to turn off your phone, people who start trying to like experience a Shabbat, to turn off your phone, even Friday night, to turn off your phone is like horror. But then when they do it, it's liberating because you have that peace of mind and clarity of like just being with yourself. That's the new thing of this generation. That the challenge and the thing. I think without that you can't reflect. So that's really where we're at, is being able to have more mastery and control over our social media and devices, because that just pulls you into the external and away out of your internal. So most people have zero control over their devices and social media. Zero control. So even starting there, let me try, like what I did it myself because I found it really, really hard. So like I made a decision that in the morning, I was not going to get up and check my emails until I got up, had a cup of coffee and said some prayers in the morning that I do, like your morning ritual. And then I was going to look at my emails, and I cannot tell you how hard that is. There's many days I fail. The days I don't are fantastic, but that's hard. I'm trying to do it consciously. Shabbat is a relief to turn off the phone. 25 hours is a relief. I feel that I only gain from doing that. I don't feel I lose from doing that. It's a huge relief. The body just on a deeper level is rejuvenated and you get access to yourself. You just can't get any other time. So I would even say like, whether it's Shabbat or not Shabbat, but just trying to, even for like 2 hours, an hour, 2 hours, turn off your phone and see if you can handle it. Set yourself some challenges, and see who you are when you're left to sit with yourself. Nowadays, the only time we get alone is in the bathroom cubicle, and then everyone brings in a phone. So like there's literally no time. There's no zero time that you get alone. Yeah.
And how do you manage the fear when you find things in you that you don't like? Have you trained yourself to be so clinical with your own experiences that when, jealousy or anger or frustration like rear up in you, you've been able to kind of be like, oh, that's interesting, I'm feeling angry right now, and then try to like limit that? How have you in your own life learned to kind of tread water in the stormy emotional situations that a lot of us find ourselves in?
I don't think it's clinical. I think it's the opposite. I think it's self-acceptance, to like see yourself mess up and go, okay, like, okay, this is where I'm at. Like, fine. Like, okay, like I know I need to work on it. I'm working on it. I'm work in progress. And it's about having patience and self-acceptance with yourself. And I think that when you can do that, life's just so much more enjoyable. I mean, I'm not saying I'm good at it at all by any means. Who said you assume that? I'm not necessarily. I just know the direction that I need to go in.
You certainly feel like
I
you're
just
a lot
know the
better
direction
than it used to be. I'm saying if you look at your experience as a person that has, now that you have learned Torah and spent serious time doing it, just comparing to where you used to be as a when you were a kid or whatever it was, without these tools and information, you feel like you've gotten significantly better, correct?
Oh yeah, because I'm clear about what's healthy, what's not healthy, because I'm clear about who do I want to become and who do I want to be. Like, I don't want to be a jealous, angry person. So even if I have lapses in those things, overall, it's not who I want to be. Whereas before I really explored Torah, jealousy, okay, it's not the best, but it's not a big deal. Like, I didn't have a crystal clear like focus on what do I want to build in myself and what do I not want to build in myself? Where do I want to put effort to build that muscle? And so, yeah, I want to build patience. I want to build being happy with whatever I have. I want to build, certain things. And so I become more conscious of those things. So that Torah becomes an incredible map and guide for that clarity of like, what direction do I want to go in? So that's what I've gained. I didn't have that when I was young.
Two more questions. I want to be respectful of your time, but this is awesome. Question number one, and this could be a can of worms. So as you know, with whatever you want to do with this concept of truth, you mentioned finding truth. It's super unpopular nowadays to have this idea of truth. So
True.
How do you relate to that?
That's true.
That? Thank you.
But I don't know
right
what's
there
true.
It is. So how do you explain that to people, or how do you justify it to yourself to say, I found something that the mass majority of people think is a figment of my imagination?
That's a very big conversation. I had a very intense debate with my brother once. It was the turning point about me choosing to go to Israel. I was not at all connected to anything really Jewish. I just had this crazy off the wall brother who was getting into it. And I believed very strongly with the conviction at the time that you choose your truth, I choose my truth, and no one's to say what's right and wrong. Universalism, pluralism, I know it's what we know, we've been raised with it. And it made sense to me, and it was logical. It is logical. And I thought all the paths of truth, subjective truth, lead to the same place of self-actualization, evolution in yourself, like developing your potential. So my brother in Israel and me in Australia, and we were arguing back and forth about this point. And he said, he stopped me one night. He said, Jay, I'm not telling you what's right and wrong. I just want to ask you one thing. He said, you believe in universalism, pluralism. There's no absolute truth. You choose your truth. I choose my truth. He said, and I believe that for every Jew, the highest path of actualizing your potential is Judaism. He said, we both can't be right. It's not that both things are true simultaneously. So I'm just asking you, what do you base your beliefs on? Like, how do you know that's the way the world works? And he says, you do realize that that's an absolute truth you believe as well about how the world works. I'm like, what do you mean? He says, you said there's no absolute truth. It's only universalism and pluralism. You choose your truth, but that's an absolute truth you believe about the world. And I was like, oh, right. So like, he goes, anyway, and he says, I'm just asking you, what do you base your beliefs on? Like, how do you know? And I had superficial answers, but deep down I didn't know, even though I was very strong. And I said, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And he said, that was a very powerful moment when I recognized in myself that I didn't know really why I believe these things with a conviction. And number two, that I believe that this is the right way, that there is no subjective truth, but that's an absolute truth. The other part of it is also that if there is no absolute truth or moral code or spiritual code of how to be and live and develop yourself, then A, you can never be really held accountable for anything. And B, there's nothing that's wrong in the world, which the average person won't agree with, meaning murdering an innocent baby for the sake, that doesn't want to be murdered, an innocent child is wrong. Most people will say that's wrong. So like there's certain lines that everyone can agree with. That's wrong. Like you can't murder someone, right? Like that's wrong. No matter what age you are, no matter what generation, no matter what culture, no matter what time in the history of time, there's certain things we believe are already absolutely wrong. And if you believe those things are wrong, that means you must believe there is an absolute version of what's right and wrong. And where does that line stop? And, I found even recently when we were discussing this in a class recently that, there's people, very, very smart people professors in colleges and universities who are now vehemently arguing that pedophilia is actually okay. That it doesn't hurt the child as long as it doesn't physically hurt the child. It can be positive to have a special relationship with someone, like crazy stuff. But if there's no right and wrong, where do you draw the line? So it's interesting. There was an article also put out by these Italian professors. Sorry, 1 second. To unplug this phone. Let me see if I can unplug it. No. There was an article not recently, a number of years ago, published. I'll just finish on this thing. Published by I think it was an Italian and Denmark. I'll look it up for you. I'll send you the article, saying that they were advocating really genuinely for postnatal abortion, and everyone's like, "What?" And they're like, that you should be able to choose after the baby is born whether you want to abort them. Everyone's like, "What do you mean?" The argument was, when does a life become a life? We can do it in the womb, so why can't we do it just out of the womb? And logically, it actually makes sense what they're saying, even though everyone is horrified. We say that's not postnatal abortion, that's infanticide, right? And he's like, it's not infanticide because a life doesn't mean anything unless the being itself is aware of its quality of life. That's the new definition of life. Life is only when I can be aware of my quality of life, and a baby's not aware. So we can kill them. So I think that if you really are honest with yourself about truth, everyone believes in some type of absolute truth that's right and wrong. Our civil courts have instituted a lot of Jewish principles and values already. Don't murder, don't steal. These are absolute values we believe are already wrong. That's all from Judaism and the commandments. And then, okay, so most people don't know more of the details of the map, but the map exists because without the map, it's a complete free-for-all. And I think that that's the most powerful discussion. And it's the most important thing to get clear on in yourself, because that's a real decider. Like, if there is an absolute truth in the world, a moral code, I want to know about it and I want to be aligned with it and I want to develop my potential. And if there's a creator of the world and a God, I also want to know that, because who wouldn't want to be best friends with a CEO? So those the biggest questions I think someone can really ask themselves and strive to get clarity in, and will change your life for the better.
And that was, I guess that was the final point, is that there is also the emotional and intellectual benefit of feeling that certainty, and that you're working within a framework, and that you're able to really be growing and be on a growth trajectory, versus kind of it just all being, I don't know how you translate Hefker, ownerless, free for all. Free for all. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you're saying
it's like walking into a gym and having no idea what the equipment is and no idea what to do, and you're like, okay, I know that I'm meant to do something good here. I know I'm meant to be a good person in life. I know I'm meant to, I'll just stick with a couple machines I know. No. So wouldn't you want a coach? Wouldn't you want a map? Wouldn't you want a guide, like how to move through every machine? You wouldn't do them all at once because it's too overwhelming. But you would want to know, I want to use this gym to its maximum effort. I want to build myself in the best way possible. So I need a coach, which we would call a rabbi or rebbitzin. I need to know the machines, the 613 machines, to develop all the aspects of a person. And I want to come out the most perfected version of myself this lifetime I can be. And I think everyone yearns for that very deeply.
That's profound. And I appreciate the shout out for the analogy that I'm very comfortable with. Thank you.
I was thinking that as I was saying it. Yeah.
Thank you. Jackie Engel, where can people find you, follow you, hear more about you, connect with you? Question mark.
Souled NYC, SOULED NYC is Instagram handle. And I'm on Facebook under my own name. And they can email me, Jackie@soulednyc.com, JACKIE @SOULEDNYC.com.
Sweet. Okay, Jackie, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
There you have it, folks, another inspiring episode. If you enjoyed this, I ask you to please share this with your friends and to like us over on Rabbi Rupp through Facebook or on YouTube. And the more that we're able to get these important messages out, the more that we can really make an impact in the world. So I encourage you, please, to stay tuned. We have a ton of amazing speakers coming up, and also to tell your friends about it. Thank you very much.